Penguin Random House Audio presents Impeachment, An American History by Jeffrey A. Engel, Jon Meacham, Timothy Naftali, and Peter Baker. Read for you by Fred Sanders. Introduction. It is rare, and for good reason. Impeaching a president is no small thing. Designed to check tyrants or oust corrupt leaders, the process of impeachment outlined in the United States Constitution nonetheless constitutes what Thomas Jefferson called the most formidable weapon for the purpose of a dominant faction that was ever contrived. It means, let us be blunt, nullifying the will of voters, and with it the basic foundation of legitimacy for all representative democracies. Hence its rarity. Only twice in 2+ centuries has the House of Representatives approved articles of impeachment against a sitting president, sending his and the nation's political fate for trial in the Senate. A third time, certain impeachment and likely conviction were averted only at the 11th hour by the resignation of a president who realized he'd run out of options. And that is it. Only 3 times in American history has a president's conduct led to such political outrage or disarray as to warrant his potential removal from office, transforming a political crisis into a constitutional one. None has yet seen the process end in a president's ouster. Andrew Johnson was impeached in 1868 for undermining Reconstruction and failing to kowtow to congressional leaders, and, in a large sense, for failing to be Abraham Lincoln, yet survived his Senate trial by the thinnest of margins. A vice president elevated following tragedy, he nonetheless made the office his own, bringing racial sensibilities and an idea of how to bring Confederate states back into the fold following the Civil War, a process broadly termed Reconstruction, far different from that the man he replaced likely would have pursued, and most surely at odds with the Republican majority in Congress. They wanted him out, but it was not clear he'd done anything wrong or illegal, save not hewing to the party line. Trial in the Senate ensued. Then haggling, bribery, threats, and soul-searching, and acquittal by a single vote. Unpopular in Washington, albeit increasingly popular throughout the defeated South, whose ideals he sympathized with, Johnson remained to the end of his term defiant, despised, and despicable, but still the president. The same cannot be said for Richard Nixon, who, under fire for 2 years, ultimately resigned in August 1974 after the House Judiciary Committee approved 3 articles of impeachment for contempt of Congress, obstructing justice, and employing his executive power for personal and political gain. The scandal began with a bungled, politically inspired break-in at the Watergate office complex, and blossomed as proof of Nixon's complicity ultimately overtook his denials and dissembling. Upon reviewing the charges, one London newspaper quipped that in the time since George Washington first took the presidential oath in 1789, the office had progressed from a man who could not tell a lie to one who could not tell the truth. Even for a nation contemporaneously beset during the early 1970s by racial tensions, energy shortages, economic woes, and a military and humanitarian debacle in Vietnam, newly sworn-in President Gerald Ford's assessment of Watergate's broad impact was only partly true. Our long national nightmare, he told Americans the day Nixon left office, is over. Its legacy lingered. Respect for journalists initially flourished in Watergate's wake, given the central role investigative writing had played in unraveling the scandal, but it did not last. The public's overall faith in the Fourth Estate weakened in the longer term as the cancer injected into the national consciousness by months of partisan slander and Nixon's lamentations of the witch hunt waged against him slowly metastasized. Nixon's supporters preferred to blame his ouster less on his own crimes than on those who reported them. Watergate, by process of indignation, Republican Senator Jesse Helms proclaimed, became the lever by which embittered liberal pundits have sought to reverse the 1972 conservative judgment of the people. Like-minded publisher Henry Regnery perceived an even deeper conspiracy. The most ominous thing about Watergate, he wrote, is that it clearly demonstrates that the press and the bureaucracy working together can destroy the president, and from now on, every president is going to have to take this fact into account. 2 generations later, these charges still ring true in conservative circles. The Richard Nixon I knew had almost nothing to do with the Richard Nixon as portrayed in the media, columnist Ben Stein explained, fully 41 years after Nixon's resignation, describing a wise but misunderstood man hounded from office by an urban and elitist news media determined to undermine his presidency and the traditional American values he espoused. Like the schoolyard bullies they are, Stein said, the media went after him for his vulnerability. This is historical tripe, but effective when delivered to a receptive audience. Lies told often enough form a reality of their own, and Americans of all stripes struggled in the decades after Watergate to simultaneously process a president's unprecedented resignation alongside broader changes in their nation's economy, global role, and even ethnic and religious makeup. Conspiratorial explanations flourished in the combative political ecosystem that followed, with partisan critique ultimately proving more persuasive, and certainly better for ratings, first on radio and then on cable television, than the unraveling of complex facts. Small wonder, then, that the public's overall trust in journalists as the watchdogs of democracy has never again reached pre-Watergate levels. Faith in government plummeted over the same period. In the broadest sense, one well-respected polling group concluded, public confidence in America's leaders hasn't been the same since Nixon's resignation. Before Watergate, more than half of Americans polled trusted their public officials to do the right thing. Never again would more than half of respondents say the same. There is a reason we apply gate to any and all public outrages since. The maelstrom that consumed Nixon's White House shattered public confidence in a manner impossible to ever again fully repair, setting the standard by which all ensuing scandals are measured. Public faith in the presidency in particular plummeted to 40% after Nixon's resignation. Gerald Ford, an honest public servant, though the only president never featured on a winning national ticket, lost his ensuing bid to remain in office in part because voters could not countenance retaining the man who had pardoned his criminal predecessor. Ford's Democratic challenger served only a single term, leading to the conclusion that, but for Watergate, Republicans may well have held the White House from the end of the 1960s to the beginning of the 1990s. Public confidence in presidential reliability, that is, faith that their president most often or always told the truth, slowly rebounded over time, ahead of their faith in other public institutions, all, in fact, save for the military, with nearly 2/3 of Americans polled during Bill Clinton's second term believing they could once more trust their president's basic honesty. Then Clinton lied too. His sexual affair with a one-time White House intern, primarily during his first term, came to light during his second, but he was impeached ostensibly not for that prurient act, but for trying to hide it during a civil sexual harassment lawsuit brought against him by another woman, and then for later lying under oath when pressed on the matter. By the time he came clean, he had already lied about his affair to the American people and his own family for 7 months. Unlike Nixon, however, Clinton refused to resign in shame, launching instead an orchestrated push to save his presidency by undermining his accuser's credibility. He ultimately won his third presidential campaign of his 2 terms when the required supermajority of senators declined to convict him of perjury.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?